Hello, coming at you live from somewhere in Texas. I would just touch a little bit more on gang stalking. We touched on it a little bit on the last broadcast, but I didn't really get to cover everything that I wanted to cover. So I just wanted to touch on a couple of things so people can get a full grasp of it if they don't comprehend what's going on with it. Because it's really not a very good thing to have to go through, okay? And I think the first thing I'd like to touch on is the symptoms. So, if somebody, thinks maybe they could possibly be targeted, maybe at least you could get like the symptoms of it. I mean, like picture the most visible and common TI symptom, especially in the first stages when the attacks are uncontrollable and the body has not coped with them yet. You know, are the red eyes. That's one thing. Now, here we try to classify all kind of symptoms that targeted individuals experience, but we refer to symptoms as both effects and control mechanisms. They have both functions at once. So mind control is one, control and manipulation of thoughts and feelings and ultimately behavior, control of thoughts and thought patterns, feelings and their expression, behavior control, dark NLP and gang stalking street theater that anchor feelings to certain words and sometimes colors or certain types of people or objects, creating the illusion of guilt. Hypnotic, it's like trigger words, and that results in specific sensations or feelings or behaviors. And monitoring attention, both where to look, but also what to think about, in the terms. And real-time mind reading before it becomes aware, racing thoughts and memories, short-term memory problems, and induced memories and synthetic associations, that are believed to be made by a computer that is aware of the context. Induced dreams or manipulation of dreams. And then there's isolation of individuals through social systems and control. Fabrication of false evidence that justifies crime prevention, or fabrication of evidence of crime and rumor spreading. In almost every case, targeted individuals are accused of a sex crime with no chance to defend oneself. Sudden unemployment, loss of friends because of rumors or direct control. The perpetrators take over the friendship and social life of the TI, and they're always rude and manipulative and not real friends. Creating symptoms of mental illness like voices in the subconscious. It's like V2K, trying to describe what is happening for others or putting the individual in a psychiatric care. Creating symptoms of substance abuse like you know, tampering with food, like putting drugs or poisons or medications, blurred vision, red eyes, disorientation, headaches, memory loss, difficulty talking or making sense, destroying the targeted individual's reputation, creating symptoms of like like insulin related diseases like pain in the spinal cord, the back of the head, terrible headaches, high blood sugar levels, enormous fatigue, or creating early retirement and poverty because of inability to work, creating symptoms or dementia because of apparent difficulty sometimes to express one's feelings and thoughts, and memory problems when the attacks are enormous. And surveillance is also an issue. Through surveillance, TI's thoughts are read in real time. Looking through targeted individuals' eyes and seeing what the targeted individual sees and knowing where the targeted individual directs their attention. There's also GPS surveillance. The targeted individual is tracked down at any time in real time. Remote neural monitoring. Some targeted individuals claim that a person um, brain can function as a fingerprint and that um, can be picked up by satellites. And that enables both surveillance of the individual and their thoughts. And gang stalkers often let the targeted individual know that he or she is under surveillance and can't escape. And they can come up and insult the TI or say something that is only known by the targeted individual, as an indication of a remote or real-time mind reading. Financial surveillance. It looks like every penny a targeted individual has is counted, and only a certain amount is allowed for the targeted individual to gain. Torture of physical, mental, psychological, physical pain due to ICT implants or non lethal weapons, direct pain in the body around the clock, and that only gets worse and worse due to ICT implants or other kind of devices, often labeled by targeted individuals as non-lethal weapons or direct energy weapons, which is called DEWs, electromagnetic frequency (EMF), or simply radiation, pain in the spinal cord, pain in the back of the head, pain in the limbic system, pain in the forehead, cooked brain, electroshocks in the brain, pain in the chest, toothache, heart attacks, pain in vital organs or liver, stomach, heart, lungs, eyes, itching eyes, leading to tears and red eyes. Food is poisoned, electronic sexual rapes during sleep or while awake, probably with ICT implants. Hypnotical trigger words can mimic any of the above symptoms: radiation, pain, bad taste, headaches, and so on, or trigger unbearable fatigue. And the trigger words come in whole sequences, like they were talking, out of a dictionary with all synonyms, with all synonyms and all words that sound alike. While some trigger words have effects on the mind and body, others have emotional effects only, that of the targeted individual to certain words that trigger negative emotions like disgust, fear, and anger. And the trigger words are sometimes reinforced through dark NLP and gang stalking. Trigger words are in the beginning very difficult to discover because they are coupled with the TI's routines, and the brain can't differentiate always between what it is made to believe and what really happens. So once discovered, they're released, becoming aware of the truth, and it wins over the lie, and that the mind has been told. So when they're discovered, new trigger words will be programmed into the subconscious. Now, there's also mental pain, which is loud synthetic telepathy, and the attackers, talk with some of the victims 24/7. They use like interrogation techniques that are only used in the CIA or Secret Service, and that is labeled also V2K, voice to skull, or loud synthetic telepathy, a learning computer with synthetic voice that can be modulated in any voice and can take over partially or full time after the initial stages. And this keeps the victim awakened and always tired. Silent synthetic telepathy, the victim doesn't hear the attackers, but there is a thought manipulation directing their attention. And there's psychological pain, bullying at work, friends and family suddenly lost, leading to isolation and bullying in general because of what appears as social problems with other people. The targeted individual moves to a place where the attackers and the manipulators can spread around any kind of rumor for people in the neighborhood and can take control in in another way. And gang stalking, rude people in crowds that appear and insult the individual using both verbal and nonverbal communication. Having 20 people or more strategically placed, like to, for example, look with hateful look or at a targeted individual They are all strangers and they're all rude. They appear every time the TI is outside, and it can take many different expressions. Sometimes it looks like they have some kind of scheme or harassment follows a pattern. And when it archives, or excuse me, when it achieves a certain stage, they reset themselves and it starts all over again. There's like street theater. A group of people plays a whole show for the individual, and it appears to follow the predetermined plot. Following the targeted individual's thinking, the thought surveillance is perceived as humiliating. And the home is entered, and the perpetrators don't steal things, but can destroy them or can leave objects that don't belong there. And they often seem to enter with a key because the doors are not forced. Thefts in town, at airports, money of belongings, destroyed means of transportation like on your car, your bike, and total lack of support. When the targeted individual meets health professionals, they are not interested in what the TI tells them. Symptoms are treated, in the old fashioned way. Many times TIs are forced to take the wrong medication and to agree to sometimes stigmatizing labels in order to receive their pension. In certain countries, the TI can be forced into psychiatry, where total loss of human rights occurs. And blacklisting often leads to inability for the TI to find work or has to accept a job way under their specialization. And at the new job, the TI is constantly under harassment and is bullied. And the police participates in the harassment and is totally insensitive to what the TI goes through. And the media ignores the TI cause. Strange coincidences happen all the time, several times a day. The TI can, in his thoughts, intercept what's going on or going to be on TV in a while, depending on the subject of interest. Some TIs are sure that the people on TV are copying them or harassing them. I mean, what do you think about what becomes reality? Expectations turn out exactly to the opposite, leading to cognitive dissonance. So, anyway, that right there is a little bit on what occurs with people when they are targeted individuals. Now, the main goal of gang stalking is to influence the life of the victim and to condition it in order to destroy it. Okay, just 1 second. Where I can read it. Okay. A widespread phenomenon, a phenomenon that is being talked about in several books and websites, a phenomenon that has definite boundaries, recognizable techniques, and specific strategies. Still, talking about gang stalking is far from being a simple issue. There's a gulf between gang stalking victims and the rest of the world. Getting over this gulf, that's the biggest difficulty, in fact. Bridging the Gap is the title of one of the most representative books dealing with gang stalking. And gang stalking makes use of subtle and hidden persecutory techniques based on obsessive repetition, immense frequency, and above all, victim sensitization methods. Apparently, these are matters of little importance to people who are not accustomed with gang stalking. They just find it hard to see these things. For them, there is every indication that the victim is crazy or has visions, and they believe that the abuse the victim is reporting is all in his or her mind. And this gap is the strength of the persecutor because of the fact that it isolates the victim. And this is the gap that needs to be bridged. The main goal of gang stalking is to influence the life of the victim and to condition it in order to destroy it. And the victim feels like he or she has been thrown in a nightmare, you know, or inside a world that is no more his or her own. Friends disappear as well as places the victim's life, was built on. And you feel your legs, just give away and you don't understand why. Strange, unnatural things happen to you, and you would start to think that you're crazy. But no, you know that you're not crazy. And you can see those things really happening in real time. And at the same time, you can tell anyone because your account, excuse me, at the same time, you can't tell anyone because your account, you know, would not be taken into consideration, or people would think that you're a maniac, or that you're suffering from obsessive syndrome. And you see things, but you realize you are the only one who see them. Gang stalking is designed to be invisible. Only the victim, an extremely experienced investigator, or anyone else who is well aware of the phenomenon could recognize it. Invisibility is the strength of this kind of persecution, see? And only, so I mean, there are many other kind of violent persecutions, right? But they are visible and there for all the world to see. But there are many ways to strike someone in a cruel manner. And you can go as far as killing someone, but then people would notice, right? So there are criminal organizations that carry out massacres, and they can hide the perpetrators and the person behind the massacre if the police doesn't find out. But they can't hide the crime itself. The massacre is for all the world to see, and nobody would deny the fact that it has taken place. On the other hand, gang stalking often takes place in public, even in the streets in the very populated areas. People around don't see. They can't see because of the gulf that is separating them from the victim's situation. Now, the victim is now sensitized and conditioned, and he or she could, be struck really hard by events that are just invisible to other people, or events that they find normal. The first challenge is to introduce gang stalking to other people and to make them understand that gang stalking exists and that it's a very serious crime. This is a silent and subtle war, a war in which anyone could become a target for the most various reasons that are often unknown to the victim, who feels himself or herself as struck by a coincidence. In order to prepare their attack, the perpetrators split into small units that don't seem to have so much relevance. People around recognize these units, but at the same time, they can't see the link between them. Therefore, they believe that nothing strange is happening. Now, this is exactly the same situation in which the victim finds himself or herself when he or she becomes the target of gang stalking. At this stage, a lot of disturbing situations involving a high number of perpetrators happen. And you would begin to wonder how this is happening, and how it is possible that so many people are conspiring against you. Then you realize that this chain of events is no coincidence. It would be statistically impossible. Organized persecution does exist, and the most different people are involved. A stalker could be a young man or a middle-aged man or an old one. Stalkers could be white, black, Hispanic, Asian, or they can belong to every other ethnicity. Excuse me. They can be attractive, ugly, or neutral. There's no way to identify a stalker just by looking at him or her. You know, it's the way he or she behaves that matters. Stalkers are not tied by their history or by their personal characteristics, but rather from their adherence to a system of extremist beliefs. This is an evil system, a system that considers everyone the gang stalkers decide to harass and destroy inhuman, practically in a more or less direct way. Stalkers are trying to set up a secret society that would be able to operate in the civil society and to strike everyone. The fact is that they can do it without anyone beyond the victim being able to realize it. And in the book Bridging the Gap, the author G.M.B. Bailey writes about the gap existing between the stalking victim and the rest of the world. Here are some excerpts from the book that can be of use to better define the danger we're in. If we don't want to be overpowered, we need to take appropriate measure as soon as possible. How to bridge the gap, Bailey writes. As a long-time researcher in the field of gang stalking, this is the question that constantly plagues me. How could I explain in a believable way to the so-called democratic countries public that just in these countries their ongoing activities which are far from being democratic? I mean, how could I explain that there are people, excuse me, driven to death, to commit suicide or any other violent action because of the fact that they have been tortured or harassed? How to explain this is a believable way without in a believable way without appearing completely mad or without passing for a conspiracy theorist? Or how to explain that year after year these democratic countries turned their citizens into the eyes and the ears of the state? And how to explain that just like in Eastern Germany, Legion of Informers has been created in these countries. I mean, how to explain that in order to be part of a global surveillance network that would be able to follow or track down a person wherever he or she goes. And these countries have not planned, if anything, they have plotted. How to explain people who find themselves in the situation I was just a couple of years ago in, you know, that all they believe about society is an illusion or even a lie. 2 years ago, I was myself blind, deaf, and dumb about what was happening around me. I dare say that I had anyone tried to explain me that in the democratic countries that there were people being tortured and human rights organizations that were not willing to help these people, then I would have been quite skeptical about it. As many other people, I grew up as a child, then was a teenager, and finally as an adult with the belief that torture was not allowed in democratic countries. And I thought that it was a prerogative of countries without freedom, countries, where people have no rights. Even today, when I think about torture, I think about countries like China or Russia. On the contrary, I don't think countries such like the United Kingdom, Canada, or the United States. However, these and many other democratic countries are the main responsibility for the horrors committed against their citizens. And I'm aware that to many of you that this would not just be difficult to understand, but even to believe. Anyway, this is my duty. So there's a gulf that separates me from where I was a couple of years ago, and I want to build a bridge on it, explains Bailey. Had I been told what was happening, I would have I would have shrugged my shoulders with sarcasm. But then I would have recommended to look for psychiatric assistance. Now I'm aware of what's happening in the countries that many of us learned to know and to love. Even it could appear that this systematic practice have been directly taken from the X Files or from a movie like The Matrix or from every other movie speaking about unknown worlds. I would like to build a bridge on the gulf that separates us from it. You know, there is a world in which the truth you have been told is a lie, and living in society is not exactly what we expected or what we believed in. It's a hard reality. If I wouldn't succeed in convincing you at the end, or at least I hope to make it clear to you about what's happening in society. Gang stalking, taken in its simplest form, is a secret investigation on a person. Stalkers keep days, a week, stalkers keep watch over this person both openly and concealed. They follow him or her 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. During the monitoring process, motorized or walking patrols are asked to follow the targeted person everywhere in order to let the informers communicate. It's common for these patrols to make use of a sign language in which a single hand is involved. This is the simplest aspect of gang stalking. It's not so difficult to understand, is it? But this is what is happening. After this first stage that causes the great separation between the victims and the rest of society, gang stalking is not only a secret investigation, but gang stalking is designed as as a systematic form of control that is able to destroy an individual's life. And the aim is to control every aspect of their life, the ones that are chosen as targets. And the secret investigation tries to take the command just like a brain virus does. All too soon, the victim finds out that he or she doesn't have any more real control on his or her own life. Friends of the victim thought of as reliable disappear, and the family that the victim relied on is no more support. Colleagues and neighbors, partners, and many other people who were considered trustworthy disappear in a similar way. And what happened to these people? Stalkers get their collaboration by imploring, mincing, deceiving, corrupting, and blackmailing them. And the final result is that the network the victim relied on doesn't no longer exist. And in this way, the victim finds himself or herself completely alone, completely isolated. In order to understand this process, it would be useful to analyze some other concepts. At an emotional and psychological level, gang stalking bears some resemblance with mobbing in the workplace. While this kind of mobbing can be recognized in a specific background workplace, that is, gang stalking can be everywhere, even in the most different circumstances and situations. Now, Bailey points out that the public could have some difficulties to recognize a practice known to very few people. Excuse me. Before mobbing in the workplace became the subject of many studies, even mobbing victims have been subjected to wrong diagnosis or have been considered paranoid. And that is what's happening. 15 years ago, before the researchers studied the phenomenon, victims were often considered as paranoids, and many of them had been locked up or underwent some kind of therapy. However, it took 15 years to realize the mobbing in the workplace, a widespread and systematic practice, is not just a European problem. The other democratic countries suffer from it as well. Until both we are those who just have an objective and calculated interest in the matter, don't understand the seriousness of the problem. And it's very easy to misunderstand something we don't know of. For example, people involved in the phenomenon or the phenomenon itself, thanks to researchers such as Kenneth Westhuse. Nowadays, the notion of mobbing in the workplace is very well understood and taken as a fact in our society. And Professor Westhuse has been himself a victim of mobbing in the workplace, but he managed to reject the attacks and spent the following 10 years studying the phenomenon and assisting other victims. So today, Westhuse is a highly regarded researcher in this field. And when we talk about intimidation, gang stalking, or mobbing in the workplace, people are often unaware of the devastating effects that these kind of harassments have on an individual. Therefore, in a community, it's the members' duty to get the people to know and understand what's happening inside this community. So 10 years ago, the word intimidation was not so well understood thanks to people like Tim Field. Today, this is a word of daily use and perfectly understandable concept. Sex practice and gang stalking are on the brink of precipice. Their, object, their objectives are on the way to be understood. And the term itself is much more popular in the society. Yet, although the term is becoming more common, a limited understanding of the concept together with prejudices about gang stalking victims survive still. Now, Bailey writes about things that I'm personally experiencing in my everyday life. Through the account of my experiences, I want to help more people to beat the monster and to eradicate gang stalking, subtle and secret persecution. I experienced directly the consequences of gang stalking, and you can't go to a bar or make a phone call because you already know the person you will meet or the person who will answer you is going to do those sort of things you have been sensitized for. And you find yourself in a world like the Matrix, but until you realize that, you will think that the problem is inside you. And you go to a psychiatrist, but even he has been recruited by the gang stalkers, and he tries to control your mind or prescribes you medicines that make you feel dazed. And you ask your friends or your mother, your husband, the police for help, and no one understands you. They can't help you. You know, I talked many times about victim sensitization, and now I need to explain clearly what that is about. Sensitization is a psychological process that associates a stimulus to a reaction or a situation. In other words, it's a technique that makes the target particularly sensitive to a daily stimulus like a color, a gesture, an object, or a simple action of everyday life. Here's an example. If the perpetrators always wear clothes or accessories of a particular color, let's say red, the victim will feel a sense of persecution every time he or she sees someone dressed in red, identifying this person as a stalker, even if he or she is not a stalker at all. In this way, the actual persecution will be amplified because the sense of it will instill in every aspect of the victim's life. And technically, this stimulus is called anchoring. And this is due to the fact that the reaction um, become anchored to that particular stimulus when it shows up. And this is why gang stalking hides itself so well. Only the victim would perceive the phenomenon in its wholeness, hidden through being at the same time for all the world to see, a blind world. Still, it needs attention and practice. They're designed to come up. Many of you are certainly familiar with those books that suggest to find the hidden object in the picture, or else the scheme in which, if you pay attention, it's possible to see a three-dimensional image printed on a flat background. First, there are many people who find it difficult to notice the hidden objects. but then they usually succeed in detecting them with a little practice. Well, once the detecting technique has been developed, the hidden objects become clearly visible with very little effort. Well, the same applies to stalking. When you know what you're looking for, it's easier to detect subliminal suggestions or subliminal aggressions. Now, as we realize, instead of adopting a direct approach to a person in possession of all his or her facilities or faculties, the aggressions are usually occults. The aggressions hide the harassment by making events happen accidentally. Usually, the harassments are even further covered. Nevertheless, it's statistically impossible that such events happen so frequently. Most of the harassments are covered by apparently simple formula. Here's the formula. Frequency, it describes the frequency with which an event takes place. Moreover, it refers to the number of actions inside a single event. Length, and it concerns the length of a single event and generally the uninterrupted duration of the harassments. Intensity, and this has to do with the amplification inside an event of such things like noise, light, crowding, and so on. So we could take as an example the car door slamming, and this is what would happen. There's a neighbor who's coming while two other neighbors go away, and while they're taking care of their vehicles, trunks and cars doors opening and closed repeatedly, alarms set off. These kind of disturbances come from the area surrounding the victim's home. So they can both be simultaneous or orchestrated. And the event lasted 5 minutes more than normal length. So beyond the length of the event, the number of repetitions of every action inside the events has been increased to frequency. For example, trunks and cars doors repeatedly slam, and even if there is only one person inside the vehicle, besides the event takes place many times during the day, like frequency, every single slam of the door or the trunk is amplified in order to produce a noise which is bigger than normal intensity. And this event involves sounds and implies a big activity or actions. Moreover, it lasts more than standard procedure seems to consist in more blows. The trunk, the front doors, the rear doors, the event can be synchronized with the victim's activities, for instance, his or her arrivals or departures. And the event could also be a part of a noise campaign consisting in the distortion of other kind of noise. And this is the base in many gang stalking techniques. Okay. Now here's here's the last one. Okay. This one is a labeled targeted individual awareness. Hi, Colin. If you're still here with me, good to see you, hon. I hadn't been able to see my screen, so I hadn't been able to see chat. Okay. Anti-gang stalking tactics that work. Okay. Okay. Point A is your phone. Your text message is sent, is intercepted, and broadcasted to others under the tactic direct connection of organized gang stalking also happens to your emails. This is done illegally and is very horrible. Over the years, got tired of law enforcement doing nothing, so I started to research this topic and found out only the recipient of the email or text message can complain. So knowing you have this illegal intercept, nobody wants to help you and stop. Then use that to your advantage to send an email or text message to yourself. So you can send this to your own account or another free Yahoo or Google email account or another phone. Now you control the information. Nobody will complain about what you say in the message because you are not going to tell on yourself. Now you own point A and point B controlling what is being said. Why do this? Because there is no third party liability for illegal intercepts of your messages. So you have a blank check to say anything about anyone, and it gets broadcasted to all those in this illegal direct connection circle. So you use that to your advantage, include Herp's picture in the text message, and say a nasty text about them, and it is broadcasted to everyone. So use the sound file, say their name, other nasty things about them, and then this is not a silent text message. Anyone standing around the open text message will, with a sound file you recorded, will hear what you said. That's you're reverse gang stalking them. And you can do this both on the internet, with emails, or with text messages using attachments on your smartphone. Use your smartphone camera, get a picture of them to use, and if you know their full name, check out Facebook and search for pictures to use of them. Also, do not forget to check mugshot.com. Nothing like using their mugshot picture, usually your worst picture. And of course, advertise the criminal record. Sure to have one if involved in organized gang stalking, being a perp or a perv or a psycho. And that's an excellent way to reverse the stalking. They hate to be exposed, so just do it. The next tactic is my favorite, called spam out the scum. So, okay. Knowing I control point A and point B, nobody can complain of what I do legally. And point C is illegally intercepted, so they can not complain. Then the stage is set for the attack on the smartphone. So forget any fancy backdoor tricks to access the smartphone. We have knowledge of this illegal intercept position and using the technology to our advantage. So we're going to create a text message on our smartphone as large as we can and use up all the characters with a space bar. Include picture, sound file. My file I created maximum was 348 kilobytes. So now we're going to use the group send function on our smartphone. And we can type in 20 phone numbers and send any message to this selective group. So we're going to be all 20 group members. So we're going to type it in our phone number 20 times. So one push of the send key will multiply ourselves and send 20 large files. In my case, I sent 20 times 348 kilobytes and sent this to an old flip phone with a refill card as my point B. My point A is my smartphone, but there is a virus on it. So you change the port speed to max on point A and point B, and all text messages are sent with high priority. So what is happening at point B is also happening at point C. So the group of scum. Now, just going to push the group send button one time, but once every 2 minutes for an hour. Any smartphone while receiving the downloadable file is unable to be used and can only receive a text message or call. Other functions are on hold until the download is complete. So you just have to wait for the file to get downloaded. But you are unaware at point C, traffic coming from point A, which can be about 600 messages, all requiring time to download. You can see at point B, this phone is totally spammed out, and point C is broadcasting the same. So you decide after 3 hours to stop, and that scum at point C will block your intercept to avoid being spammed out. Well, victory is exactly what you want to happen. Get the perps, pervs, and psychos to disconnect from your business. So let us all get together and do this nationwide. Spam out the scum and get it done. So that's something that might help some people out. I don't know. But anyway, that's just something else I wanted to go over about gang stalking. Hopefully, this information helps out some people, you know. And anyway, since I've been on here like 46 minutes now, so I'm gonna go ahead and close this broadcast since I don't have anybody in chat. Colin was in chat, but I'm not sure if he's still there. So until the next one, sending love and peace y'all's way. Merry Christmas, you guys. Bye bye.